Welcome to Connecting the Dots' second podcast on race and equity in early childhood education. I'm Pat, and I'll be joined by two of my colleagues in just a moment, where we'll be sharing resources and discussing strategies to support conversations on this important topic. This picture of a teacher's lounge, we hope, will inspire you to think about where you and your colleagues might have these important conversations. For now, we're happy to have you join ours. So let's get started. Welcome to Connecting the Dots in Early Childhood Education and to our second roundtable conversation. We can't wait to get started. And in tonight's conversation, we're going to be building on our first roundtable conversation, which really allowed everyone to get to know us a bit and know a little bit about our own racial backgrounds, our own cultural backgrounds, our own educational early childhood backgrounds, and some of the things that have shaped us to be the adults we are today. And we always feel like that's the best place to start when getting ready to enter into some of these conversations that can be difficult around race and equity in education. So that being said, I'm Pat. I'm going to be your host once again, and I feel privileged to be with my colleagues, Allison and Shannon. And Allison, do you want to say a little bit about what you're thinking about tonight's conversation and how we're going to build out some of the things we touched on in our last one?
Well, I'm just very excited for this opportunity that you're providing. It's a very, discussing race and equity is a very touchy point, a touchy issue, especially at this time, and something that a lot of teacher ed programs do not prepare you for. So the chance to really sit and explore this is very exciting. Classrooms can be very dynamic. You don't know what's going to happen from day to day, and just helping to prepare teachers for that is very exciting.
I agree. Shannon, what about you?
I'm thinking a lot about what it means for teachers to be ready, and how hopeful I am that participating in this conversation, the specific conversation, and the ones that we encourage you to have on your own, will lead to feelings of bravery and feelings of, if not comfort, a readiness and a willingness to engage in the conversations that children need for their attachment partners, their adults, their big people, their teachers, to have together and with them.
Wow. So yes, and we want to support everybody finding a place to, while we know that it's never going to be completely comfortable, building some comfort into the way that you feel you can start to step into this in an early childhood setting. Mm-hmm. So we've been talking about that. And I know, Shannon, you shared a resource with us that I just loved, that I would love to share with our listeners, that comes from Sesame Street, some of the work that they're doing. We applaud them. They're really stepping right into it right now when this critical time in the history of our country and the world, full force. And they're just acknowledging the fact that young children are having these questions. They're having these musings and wonderings and queries, and they may not be able to ask the questions, but they are seeing it, they are feeling it, and they are thinking. And so the respect that Sesame Street shows for their image of the child is just so strong that that I found that really exciting. So who would like to speak to a little bit about what you really appreciate about what the Sesame Street platform is doing right now?
I have the article up on my computer, so I want to, or I can, read a very short paragraph and then talk about it, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Sound good? Okay. So just to preface this, that Sesame Street has added to its wonderful cast of puppets a father and son, a Black father and son. And we know from Sesame Street's history is that they've never shied away from trying to make a a television world that is reflective of the real world. And so Elijah is the father. And so I'm going to read about Elijah. It says, in the video, Elijah agrees with his son before diving into an explainer of how melanin determines skin, hair, and eye color. The color of our skin is an important part of who we are, but we should all know that it is okay that we all look different in so very many ways, he says. And it goes on to talk about these other real world conversations that these puppets will have with each other and the other puppets that are around them. And for me, this stands in contrast to the color blindness that some folks feel that they need to have or to express, because for them, color blindness equals equality. If folks say that I don't see color means that we are beyond, race and having a racial society, but we're not beyond it. And so this resource, Sesame Workshop with the new Black puppets, is a resource that can help teachers have these conversations when children make these very natural observations about themselves, their families, and then the classroom around them, the teachers and their friends. And so that's why I feel like this is a really great resource and really powerful because of the modeling it will provide.
Yeah, I agree. I feel that Sesame Street is my boo. I've always loved them. I've always enjoyed them. They're my go-to often. A lot of memories linked with them. We're the same age, haha. But I two things I like about their approach to it, similar to what you were saying. I like how they keep it simple. And the example you gave, I find is a great resource for me because lots of times it's really challenging to know how to start to talk to kids at a certain level. They'll ask the questions. And I feel as an educator, especially working with little children, and it's tricky because in your general life, you may go through many different areas. 1 minute you're talking to grown-ups, next minute you're talking to maybe parents, and the next minute now you have to phase down or get down into a much younger child. So I love how Sesame Street is there to provide the model of how to talk about and sometimes what kids want. It's a lot of huge topics that they tackle. And many times as a teacher, you're not sure, where do I start? When they ask a simple question, where do you start? But oftentimes it's a reminder that they just really have a basic, I want to know the basic facts, and sometimes that conversation you pointed out, that interaction where they start talking about melanin, sometimes you may not even think to talk there. You may want to get at a more esoteric, higher plane, which is where you as an individual are with this topic. So I love the fact that Sesame Street is out there to support us from, in terms of helping to sort of pull apart all the other parts of our lives that we are part of, because this is something that's impacting us daily on one level, but to be able to phase things out so that you can be there properly to support the students themselves.
Yeah. I just want to ask this question. What do you think is the biggest fear that teachers have when entering into these conversations? And for me, I just want to suggest that I think some teachers are afraid that what they may be saying may not align with what the children are being taught at home, and that the child might go home and say something that would cause controversy and upset parents because their messaging may be different. So I think it's about what you were saying, Allison, is it's not that you're messaging any one thing, it's that you're inviting them into the conversation and the musings and the exploration around some of these topics you don't have to dictate anything. Let them walk around in it with you and they will form some of their own opinions because they already are little critical thinkers,
Yes.
but I think that's delicate, and it's a funny and difficult dance to know how to orchestrate it. Shannon, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that many teachers, and especially thinking about teachers in the United States, we know that it's about 80+% of white teaching workforce. And so I think that many teachers are afraid of being thought of as racist or saying something that sounds racist, which then opens up, a whole other set of challenges. And then I think there's also this almost like mythological space that they have in their head reserved for these conversations, and that children don't see this, don't notice what's going on. Children don't notice sameness and difference, and don't know, what some of those things mean. And therefore, by talking about it or bringing it up, they are opening a door that's still closed. We know that door is open, but
Right.
there's a lot of fear, I think, around being one of the first adults to talk with children about this.
I think that's a very good point.
Yeah.
Alice, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, in terms of what I feel teachers are experiencing, if they're anything like I was, fair, a lot of this time. I think you touched on a lot of the points in terms of what do the parents expect? How are you sort of staying true to them and strengthening that partnership by supporting them, by mirroring or again encouraging the certain type of mindset,
Right.
which is something that may not be spoken of or discussed often enough in
Mhm.
our field. And in that regard, I think one of the most important and crucial things that can be done is, again, as we're starting here, having those conversations. I think one of the best things that can be done is for schools to be providing that space
Mhm.
for teachers, colleagues to collaborate and start having those conversations so you don't feel as blindsided
Mhm.
going in. And sometimes it can be very frustrating. You start off as a teacher with a plan. This is what my lessons are going to be out. This is what I'm going to do today. And here comes a child, or there comes a situation that changes everything. And oftentimes as teachers, sometimes you don't feel valued enough. And then
Mhm.
to have all your hard work for that lesson be in some ways feel like it's being tossed aside is certainly not the type of foundation for you to be having when you're trying to talk about these difficult situations. So I feel one of the best things could be setting aside that time to have those difficult conversations all the time, to not act like it didn't happen this weekend and things like that. So in terms of having the courage, I think you mentioned that earlier, Shannon, to start talking about these difficult conversations, get to know the people, see the differences that exist,
Right.
and come together about that,
So I hear
and
what you're saying, Allison, and I think what you're saying is it's the family connection, so that if you're building that trust and those communication skills around that, what could come up with your families by engaging with them in that open and honest way as you're building relationships, um, you won't be as afraid if you really have those, if you know where your children are coming from, if you know where your students are coming from, if you're building those bridges to their homes, and if you're inviting those parents into the classroom and you're getting to know a bit more about them. And I was also thinking when you were talking, I was thinking about, it's important for leadership in every school to also have a philosophy that is made clear, right? Because that supports you then, because you know that from top down, everybody's on the same page around these specific talking points when it comes to race and equity.
I totally agree.
So yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but I think teachers, it is frightening a lot of times, and especially in the world we're living in today. Um, I think we've all, for history's sake and for our own documentation, right now, as we're making these roundtable conversations, we are witness to George Floyd's trial. And there is no way that young children are not seeing what's happening around that. There's no way that they're not seeing what's happening around the attacks on our Asian sisters and brothers. So all of these things children are aware of, and to pretend that they are not is a mistake. And we need to stop making that mistake, right?
Mm,
So yeah,
I agree. I just want to say I'm glad that you brought up the trial taking place right now for the murder of George Floyd, and remembering how important it is to be mindful of what not only history but current events.
yeah. So far we've touched on one great resource, which is Sesame Street. And I think that in our conversations, we're always going to be trying to find those resources to share with our listeners. Shannon, for some reason, I think your camera stopped, but not before you turned sideways, which was an interesting perspective to see. But we do hope we'll see you back with us as soon as you're able. But in the meantime, you know, I think that Allison, one of the other things that we had talked about, that we just have a few more minutes left. We have about 5 or 6 more minutes. But I was thinking that one of the things we had also chatted about a little bit is we also in these conversations want to think about always sharing a strategy that maybe a teacher could use, right?
Mhm.
So far we've talked about making sure that your school and the leadership is making clear what the philosophy of the school is, and that's certainly a place for teachers to start. But what is something that I know you shared some beautiful music with me from your culture, and I want to honor that. I think we've lost Shannon, so Shannon will come back with us at the next roundtable, but her contributions tonight were certainly well appreciated. But Allison, tell me, what do you think about the music and how I think that was what you were saying you would use as a teacher to weave through.
Right. I mean, I was from our conversation and our relationship, I often try to just sort of share, give you another perspective. And it's just amazing the wealth of art out there.
Yes.
And I think as teachers, really being mindful of what is in our classroom and what we are sharing and what we're exposing children to, and just putting that effort to make sure that it does touch on it does touch a wide and diverse segment of the world's population. And that's often when we think of connecting cultures, we often start with food, right? But music is another one, and maybe more COVID friendly nowadays, that would be great to start with. Have parents and families send in what they listen to at home, what they like to share. And that could be a great way. You can have some great songs and sounds that the children can become mindful of and understanding of the different culture.
I love that. And I also remember you kind of pointing out that oftentimes in schools, welcome back, Shannon, oftentimes in schools, classical music is the go-to for soothing and setting that tone for whatever's going on, that, you know, but you were suggesting that there's beautiful music that does the same thing from other cultures, instead of always it being the go-to, which is a kind of I think a very white thing. That for teachers to be mindful of exploring those other cultural sounds, and those other cultural sounds that can do the exact same things that are usually our go-tos, as you said, Shannon, because 80% of us are white in the education system. So how can those of us like myself become more mindful and sensitive to the fact that if we broadened our lens with intentionality and did the research and that took the time to start bringing those different things into the classroom, again, with intention, that you would see a real difference in the feel of everybody having a bit more of a part. So there's a lot more that we could talk about tonight, but I feel like we've pretty much reached our listeners' probably ability to sit with us, and we want them to come back. So, anybody have anything else to say before we say goodnight? How about
Keep
this?
having conversations.
Yeah.
Be brave. Don't stop.
Be brave, don't stop, and don't forget to come back again for our next conversation, our third roundtable conversation. We can't wait to continue to engage with you in this way and have you be part of our community. So until then, see you next time.